Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, there's something about dance and movement on screen that is just so hard to look away from. And guess what? If you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with, once more, as always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And you know, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on that limb and assume that you do, because let's face it, you're listening right now. And if you are, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Give us your 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere. Places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we'd absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, the Letterboxd, the TikTok, and probably a few other places, quite frankly. And In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because guess what? If we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it even more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So do us that kindness and pay us a visit. On this episode, boy oh boy, we got a special one. We got a real good one. And it's about a film that played TIFF. It's a gorgeous documentary called Swan Song by director Chelsea McMullan. And it's the story of quite literally Karen Kain's Swan Song as she mounts a production of Swan Lake, her first time as director, but things get in the way, much like a pandemic, much like many other things. And what Chelsea and her team managed to do here is really put us in the thick of what it means to mount an actual production like this. It doesn't just take a village, it takes a whole damn army, quite frankly. And Chelsea and her co-writer and producer, Sean, who we had the pleasure of talking to, really allow us to see not only the beauty that goes into mounting a production of Swan Lake like this at the National Ballet, but also sort of the brutality and sort of the fact that it really is a bit of a war of attrition to get these things mounted and done. It is a compelling and a hugely beautiful film that I cannot recommend enough, which is playing now at the TIFF Bell Lightbox for a limited run, and also there's going to be a series of it as well, I do believe, coming out later this year. So keep an eye on your local listings for that. But first off, enjoy our talk with Chelsea and Sean, because between you and me, it's a darn good one. All right, well, Sean, Chelsea, I mean, obviously, just to kick it off, I mean, thank you so much for the time today, and congratulations on the film. I was blown away when I saw it. I absolutely loved it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That means a lot. We worked really hard.
Well, I don't know. I can imagine. I mean, and I guess that dovetails into my first question. Like, walk me through the origins of wanting to do this, because it definitely feels like you had a pandemic in the middle that sort of stretched the whole process out probably a lot longer than you wanted it to.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, we started with the idea of the kind of project we wanted to do. Not so much that we wanted to make a ballet filming series. I don't know if you know about, like, we made a series.
Series as well, yeah.
But we wanted to do something big, and we wanted to lose ourselves in a world and bring people into a world and spend a long time with characters and shoot something verite. And we knew in order to do that, we needed to have a kind of hook that we could raise significant funds, because the way of shooting that is expensive. And I was a production company, and we wanted to produce it ourselves because we'd been kicking around a bit and thought naively, we could do it better.
Well, it's had all the
power. But yeah, and then, we were doing this show called In the Making for CBC, and part of what we needed to do was, for that show, was like know what was happening in kind of the art scene and across disciplines. because we were making docs about artists in different disciplines. And so I knew that Karen was directing Swan Lake and that it was her directorial debut and her farewell to the company in 50 years. And very quickly we thought, oh, we could make a project that's not just like another Karen Kain doc, but that could immerse us into the world of the company. And she can be at the center of it, but part of an ensemble, and like look at the hierarchy and look at all the issues in ballet. And like if we can really crack it, it could be amazing. But that was February 2020. And so Swan Lake was scheduled for June. And we wrote to the ballet immediately, knowing that it was like almost impossible that we would raise funds and be able to shoot that quickly.
Yeah.
So on one hand, this project probably wouldn't have happened without the pandemic. And it also gave us 2 years to develop relationships with our characters and raise the funds. But, you know, we were also raising a significant budget for a project that nobody knew when or if it would happen. So yeah, it was sort of like, you know, a blessing in a certain way and a curse in others.
Yeah, and challenging in others. Yeah.
And like,
well, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that just as I watched it, I appreciated, like, not just the obvious things of, you know, the ballet is beautiful, everybody loves it, but I mean, it's also physically brutal, and just mounting these things it's a war of attrition. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, like when you were sort of boots on the ground there, like how quickly did you sort of realize the sort of the wow of it all in terms of how much work and how much sort of pain and suffering actually goes into mounting a production like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we intuited a bit, like, that ballet is this kind of like, I think from representations in media that like it's sort of a brutal art form. But like the how of it all and the details of it all and how to represent that and the things that we didn't know, I think were like what we sort of like what was really interesting. Like I didn't know there was multiple casts. So like, yeah, that like essentially like it's like running a marathon for these dancers. So they can't actually even physically do more than a few performances of this ballet. And also, you know, like what I learned in the process is like classical ballet is very difficult. Then Swan Lake is one of, if not the most difficult classical ballet. And then the version of Swan Lake that they were making was an incredibly difficult version of Swan Lake. So what they were trying to do was so huge and so like the scale was so massive. And even like, and you know, we sort of get into it in the film and even more in the series of like the costumes are so prohibitive because they're so huge. It was just like everything was so big, but it like made everything. And, you know, the COVID of it all, it just started to sort of like exponentially, the scale just felt like it was like weighing so much on the company and the dancers, especially the corps de ballet.
Sure. No, I mean, I've got to ask in something like this, like, how do you stay out of the way? Because I can imagine there's sort of there's a challenge to be like, you want to be there, you want to catch everything, but there's so many moving parts that you literally have to have your head on a swivel.
That's its own battle for sure.
You should describe like the process of like all the shit we had to do to shoot.
Yeah. So I had a bit of a vision of what our process would be. And I had been collecting it, like collecting different ways different filmmakers did things over the years, and had sort of compiled in my head what a process would be like in the field of what I wanted to do. And I had shot some verite, but not that much. This was something I was really like very interested and excited to do just creatively. But one, I really felt like we needed mics on the dancers. So I was actually introduced to me by Kobe Bryant, who invited me to, he had a documentary production company at one point had invited me down to come and like see what they were doing. And they had made a documentary about him and his final season of the NBA. And they were talking to me about these NBA player mics and how small they were. And so he wore one the whole season for the documentary. And so I had this idea that we'd get these like player mics that they use on professional athletes. And even still, it was really hard to get them on the dancers. Like they're wearing these skin tight leotards. They don't like to have anything like hanging off them. Like they don't like any sort of appendage is like, you know, weighs them down with what they're doing. So it was definitely like a navigation. Also, they can never be late for rehearsal, but there's only this very short time because they're running from rehearsal to rehearsal. So there's 5 minutes, if that, like more like 3 to like from in the transition of rehearsal get them mic'd. So we'd be like, so they were getting pissed off with us about that. And then we were like trying to change the lighting and they were getting pissed off with us about that. And then we're trying to like follow them and we keep getting in the way. And so that was kind of like, and then essentially we had 2 cameras, 6 people mic'd at any given time, dancers, coaches, Karen, 2 cameras. Then we kept adding a camera as we went, but generally 2. I'd be watching on it like on my cell phone. We had an app that would allow me to see the 2 cameras. And then I had a Comtech that had all 6 channels of audio, and I'd be in the corner watching the monitor, flipping with walkie-talkie, and our each of our DPs and our sound people were connected. And so then I'd just be trying to figure out like what's the most important thing to shoot in the scene right now, flipping through channels of audio, watching the conversations, watching what they're filming. And then just like radioing, no, there, follow Shay, follow Ariel, like this is happening. And then sort of taking notes, anything that I thought, we would be having story meetings every day, all of us, and then like taking just as like diligent notes just to be able to like be like, no, this could be an important moment. This could be an important story beat to follow. So
our TPs had to learn the choreography ultimately. Like the footage started to come to life when our TPs learned all the pas de deux, the duets, so that they could move. You see in the film, like they're with the subjects, but
For sure.
We knew that it took only one crash to get us banned from rehearsals. So the stakes were very high, because if we injured a dancer, like
it's
all
over.
this access we were gaining slowly but surely, day by day, would be done. So it was a constant negotiation.
Well, I love how you did that, because I mean, just the way you described it makes perfect sense. I mean, it's not a multi-camera like sports shoot. You're a Canadian independent documentary shoot, and you've got to figure it out best way possible. But I mean, that's kind of ingenious. And I mean, I'm curious because, like you said, the trust you both had to build with the dancers, I can imagine was a slow process. Was everyone on board? Was even sort of the production on board for both of you to have cameras in the faces of the dancers?
Yeah, I mean, Karen was the artistic director when the ballet agreed to do this, and so she and Barry Hewson, who's the art executive director, we were really upfront about what we wanted to do and how much we wanted to be there and how real we wanted it to be. And I think Karen liked that she wasn't the center of it and liked that it was about the whole company. And they said yes. And I mean, and I think they're smart enough and savvy enough to know that like a project like this that hits internationally could be incredibly good for the company. And I think that was surely part of why they said yes. Plus, we'd worked together before. I worked with the ballet when I was working at the AGO in another life on a commission. And, we made a documentary about Crystal Pite, somebody who Karen really admires. And I know they had a little backdoor conversation. So, they were in theory, but, the way that big institutions work is the heads can say yes, but there's a million fiefdoms. So there's the costume, kingdom, and then there's like the land of sets, and then there's like the land of tech, and there's the dancers and
stage managers.
And so we had to, there's no one centralized yes. It was like every department, every dancer themselves has a lot of autonomy at that company, and we had to build relationships with everybody. So very quickly, like, it's not a one-person job. Like, we kind of divided and conquered and figured out that like, oh, okay, like this person responds better to like Chelsea and this person responds better to me. And so we just would figure out where the chemistry was and just try to move together to try to get that intimacy. But, when it came to the core subjects like Shay and Gita and Karen, and in the series, Sipe and Ariel, like, those are real. I mean, they have to be real relationships. They have to be sincere. They have to be deep. And you don't get any depth on film that isn't directly commensurate with the depth of the connection you sort of have in person. And that's something that, we took really seriously.
That was just like building those relationships a lot over the pandemic, over those 2 years of just like being with them, not in the context of shooting.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm curious on something, and I'd love both your takes on this, because just as a film person and a film fan, I've always been like enraptured and fascinated by watching sort of dance on film, from like even like stuff in the 50s and early 60s when they captured Martha Graham stuff, to later stuff with Pina Bausch and Alvin Ailey. What is it about dance on screen that is so compelling? And I'm kind of curious, like, did your perspective of that kind of change having been in the thick of it and sort of go through the process of capturing dance on film?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I don't know if you feel like this, but I feel like it is really compelling when it hits, but it so rarely hits. Like it's actually really difficult to capture it in a way that feels not like a live capture.
Right.
And I
like a secondary expression.
yes, like its own sort of representation of like, because I think what the challenge is yeah, when you don't interfere cinematically, then yes, then that's what it becomes, and that for me is never as exciting, because I think what film allows you to do is sort of see the piece and understand the piece from different vantage points and different perspectives. And that's something that you're not just seeing the proscenium in the theater and you're not sitting there. It's like it allows the viewer something else. And if you're not using that, then, it's not, I think, so exciting. So, Pina for sure was a huge influence. I think that's a beautiful film. I love Wim Wenders. And yeah, I think there was like a lot of other films. The Company was another one. Actually, the way that Robert Altman shot The Company, if you watch just the performance,
yeah,
huge inspiration. And just the way he shot in general, that was an inspiration for even, I know that those were, a combination of actors and non-actors in that film, but it's not such a different process,
Yeah. Which we know because Nev Campbell told us.
Yeah, Nev Campbell told us so many like stories about Bob Altman, and Sean and I would be like, give us all
we call him.
But yeah, but I agree with you. Like when it hits. And I think it's just been a language that I think I've been developing on my own, and then Sean and I have also been developing together. So we made this Crystal Pipe film, where we actually were like commissioned to capture the performance in its entirety, which is different than how we made Swan Lake. But it was really like useful and informed how we did it. Just the ability to capture a ballet from start to end in a way that was like allowing us a different level of access. So we were allowed on the stage in that performance, and we had a steady cam on stage, and we had a techno crane, and we were allowed to have these kind of different vantage points. And in that performance as well, we mic'd the dancers, which informed then that we were able to mic two of the dancers in Swan Lake, which I think really gives you that kind of sense of like the dancer's perspective within the performance. Sure. But I'll let Sean tell you the sort of like unlocking of the Swan Lake performance.
Oh yeah.
Because this is really, I think, what sort of defined how we did the performance in the feature version.
Well, I mean, it speaks to what you're talking about in terms of the immersiveness of the cinematic form, which is like something to take advantage of in dance. But for us, like the scene of the opening night was not a dance sequence.
Yeah.
It was like a battle scene. We watched like the Lord of the Rings. We watched the Battle of Helm's Deep, and we were like, oh, like a great battle scene. You're like up close with your characters, and you're tracking exactly what they're doing, and you see what the obstacle is, and you see them overcome it, and then you're like back, and you're like sweeping, and you're seeing the whole scope of what's happening. So that was like the inspiration. But I mean, the general answer to your question for me is like, I think the relationship between dance and cinema when it hits is so profound, because it's sort of like creating this vibration between like the essential quality of the two media, which like have this oppositional like function, because dance is inherently ephemeral and constantly disappearing, and film is preserving something and preserving a moment. And so that exchange is
It's a tension.
It's very beautiful, you know, and when it hits, it feels like two forms that are meant to fit together.
Well, and I mean, I love that you referenced Lord of the Rings because I mean, there is an epicness to it. Just the way it all comes together and the
And
intensity.
Tchaikovsky.
Mhm.
Of course, yeah. But I mean, just to really start putting a bow on this, because something that always fascinates me about films like this, and especially when you're both boots on the ground doing it, I mean, you never know until you know. Was there a moment in the process where it was like, this might work?
Mhm.
We knew on opening night, honestly, it was so stressful and so hard, and we never knew. And we thought your Gita might not perform, and we thought like, you know, the show was going to be bad, very close to opening night. COVID could have hit at any point. Like the company was taken out in the middle of Nutcracker. Like it was, we were white knuckling it. But on opening night, we looked at each other after we finished, and we were like, "We got it. We got it."
Mhm.
Little did we know we would be like dumping our edit 4 months later and starting all over again. But we knew,
Yeah.
and we did start all over again because we knew
We're like,
we
it's
had
there. We know it's in the footage. We know it's there. You have to trust that it's there. Like you know when you got it. You just know.
So
But
I mean,
finding it's hard.
well, I don't know, I'm sure. But I mean, now that it's premiered and I mean it's going to be playing, and then the series is coming, like, are you in the middle of the exhale moment, or has that happened yet?
Mhm.
Yeah, it started.
Yeah, we just spent a week together at a cottage, like just reconnecting as friends because we've sort of been working so hard alongside each other. And honestly, like I feel like we could teach a master class in, like communication. Like we're really proud of the fact that like it was so much pressure and that we like really just like dug in deep and like talked through our conflicts and talked through like creatively what we were trying to achieve. And so
So
like
we're starting a filmmaker group therapy circle.
yeah,
That's our next.
if you want to join, it's like open to all. But yeah, anyways, so we sort of like I think we finally felt like we were on the other side of it.
Well, I mean, much like mounting a production of Swan Lake, filmmaking is a war of attrition in and of itself. And I mean, thank you both for making it to the other side and doing such great work on this film. Like, I can't wait for more and more people to see it. But honestly, Sean, Chelsea, just again, thank you for the work and thank you for the time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dave. So
Yeah.
nice to meet you.
Yeah, it was really
Nice
nice
to
to
meet you
meet
guys.
you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the great questions.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.